Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Mundan Bhattacharya. Coming up in the next hour, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address a summit of the future at the UN headquarters in New York. The theme of the summit is multilateral solutions for a better tomorrow. United Nations adopts groundbreaking Pact for the future to transform global governance. UN Secretary General says the Pact opens the door to new opportunities and untapped possibilities. National People's Power leader Anura Kumara Dasanaike sworn in as the President of Sri Lanka.
We have a deep understanding that we have got a challenging country. Our politics must be cleaner than this. There is a need for a political culture that people expect.
Sensex and Nifty touch all-time closing highs amid strong foreign fund inflows. A lot of diplomatic action is underway at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Their world leaders are deliberating upon course correction to make sustainable development for all a reality at the ongoing UN Summit of the Future. Member countries adopted a pact for the future that includes a global digital compact to regulate AI, fight misinformation and connect the whole world to the internet. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also going to address the Summit of the Future on day 3 of his US visit. DD India's correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh brings us more.
On day 3 of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States, focus would be on the Summit of the Future at the United Nations. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will present India's vision on sustainable tomorrow. At the heart of the summit lies the idea that 21st century challenges require 21st century solutions. It is a recognition that the world has fallen behind in meeting its targets, from sustainable development goals to mitigating climate change. Global institutions have failed to evolve and reform. Regional conflicts threaten global peace. Earlier on Sunday, UN General Assembly adopted a Pact for the Future, which the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres described as a landmark agreement that is a step change towards more effective, inclusive and network multilateralism. The Pact covers themes including peace and security, global governance, sustainable development, climate change, digital cooperation, human rights, gender, youth and future generations. Given how failed development targets disproportionately impact poor and developing countries, all eyes will be on how Prime Minister Modi articulates the concerns of the Global South. Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in New York.
With a lot of diplomatic action in New York this week, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is all set to make the country statement for India on behalf of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the United Nations General Assembly during its general debate on the 28th of September. The general debate of the 79th UNGA session will take place from 24th to 30th September. World leaders adopted the Pact for the Future as the Summit of the Future opened at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The Pact covers 56 themes, including peace and security, sustainable development, climate change and transformation of global governance. The Pact for the Future is the UN's master plan for tackling challenges that lie ahead for humanity. It also promises to accelerate efforts to attain sustainable development goals, which aim for the eradication of extreme poverty, among other goals, by 2030.
Au défi de passer à l'action, de mettre en œuvre le pacte pour l'avenir en privilégiant le dialogue et la négociation, en mettant fin aux guerres qui déchirent le monde et en réformant la composition et les méthodes de travail du Conseil de sécurité.
The Mexican Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Alicia Bárcena, has called for urgent reforms to the United Nations Security Council at the UN Summit of the Future. She highlighted the legitimacy crisis the UN is facing, calling for the abolition of veto power and an overhaul of the Security Council to better represent the geopolitical realities of the Global South.
We cannot hide our dismay at the fact that the ambition for UN system reform, especially of the Security Council, has been diluted despite its evident ineffectiveness in recent years. Thus, it remains pending to adjust this mechanism to the geopolitical reality that includes Global South and eliminates the veto once and for all.
At the summit, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau emphasized the need for collective responsibility and urged nations to set aside differences and confront serious global challenges. He called for a renewed commitment to multilateralism and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals to better serve citizens worldwide. The 10th edition of the World Free Zones Organization Congress began on Monday in Dubai. The three-day annual event brings together leading experts, decision makers and stakeholders from the free zones, logistics and multilateral sectors globally. The theme of the year is Zones and the Shifting Global Economic Structures, Unlocking New Investment Avenues, which aims to explore the latest trends, emerging technologies and innovations shaping the free zones sector. A session featuring ministers and top industry leaders was held on day one with discussions on the role of AI and technologies in global trade.
I think it's in the nature of the Indians. Every Indian wants to be an entrepreneur, right? Wants to start his own business, which is a fantastic approach. And when you come to IFSA, when you come to our free zone, we are supporting them.
India was the net importer of the financial services, be it aircraft leasing, ship leasing, bullion exchange. There was no spot exchange in India. And GIFT City gave a platform to all these financial services, right from international stock trading to bullion exchange to aircraft leasing, ship leasing, which were happening from the countries like Ireland, Panama, Bahamas, and other jurisdictions. So those have been shifted to GIFT City since 2014.
India's Home Minister Amit Shah attended a Bharatiya Janata Party rally at Yamunanagar in the North Indian state of Haryana on Monday ahead of upcoming Haryana Assembly elections. Speaking at the event, he stated what BJP plans to achieve in the coming 5 years in the state of Haryana.
आने वाले 5 साल में 8000 मेगावाट का नया थर्मल पावर स्टेशन यमुनानगर में बनाएंगे, औद्योगिक बुनियादी ढांचे पर सब्सिडी देंगे, विश्वकर्मा महाविद्यालय बनाएंगे, माता और शिशु का स्वास्थ्य केंद्र यमुनानगर में बनाएंगे, सिविल अस्पताल में आईसीयू बनाएंगे, ओलंपिक की नर्सरी बनाएंगे और माताओं बहनों जोर से ताली बजाना, सभी महिलाओं को प्रति माह 2100 रुपये का चेक आपके बैंक अकाउंट में आ जाएगा.
India's Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia has said that the number of mobile connections have increased to 117 crore from 90 crore. Previously, India has emerged as a leading telecom market at the global stage. He stated that Telecom Ministry has put up 7,258 new towers throughout India in 100 days. He was speaking at a media briefing on the achievements of the government in the 100 days since the new government took office.
और मुझे खुशी है आपको रिपोर्ट करते हुए कि 100 दिनों में 15 सितंबर तक 7,258 नए मोबाइल के टावर्स हमने देश के कोने-कोने में लगाए हैं.
Nidhi Khare, Secretary, Department of Consumer Affairs, spoke on India government's 100 days achievements in an interaction with the media. Speaking on various issues, the Secretary mentioned that the ministry has taken many steps to curb price rise of food materials by means of NAFED and NCCF. Among other significant steps are price control of edible oils, the setting up of quality control centers in Kolkata, Mumbai and Bangalore, to check battery and charges of electric vehicles in light of their increasing demands and much more.
Achieved was procurement of against a target of 5 LMT Rabi onion for buffer. 4.7 LMT of Rabi onion was procured by NCCF and NAFED. And now the disposal of onions at subsidized rate of 35 rupees per kg has been initiated from September 5th, 2024. Now we come to the tasks that we completed this year with the help of National Test House, and the most important was unmanned aircraft systems certification.
India's Civil Aviation Minister K. Ram Mohan Naidu emphasized the importance of aviation psychology and managing stress and fatigue to ensure aircraft safety. Speaking at a national seminar in Delhi, he noted human factors as key contributors to accidents, urging continuous upskilling in the fast-growing Indian aviation sector. With over 1,200 planes on order, Naidu called for enhanced training in both technical and cognitive skills for aviation personnel.
We see that even in the Western countries, they are also having a specific division of aviation psychology. And it is an emerging space right now. And considering the human errors that have been taking place, I also feel that it is important to have it in our country also. It is in a very budding stage. So we would request the cooperation of all the airliners and everyone so that we can collectively address this aviation psychology.
Still to come on DD India News Hour. Dengue claims 6 lives in Bangladesh. Indian Army commemorates Haifa Day.
सर 50,000 एडवांस। पर इतना कैश तो हम नहीं लाए।
और आज बैंक भी बंद है।
इलाज है डिजिटल पेमेंट का आसान सा ढूंढ। लेकिन अरे घबराइए मत, सावधानी के साथ करेंगे तो कोई साइड इफेक्ट भी नहीं होगा। फोन लाइए मुझे, यहाँ फोन लगाइए। डिजिटल पेमेंट से लेन देन हो सकता है आसान, सुरक्षित और तेज। मैंने तो इन्हें डिजिटल पेमेंट सिखा दिया है। आपने, क्योंकि RBI कहता है कि
डिजिटल पेमेंट अपनाओ,
औरों को भी सिखाओ।
जिंदगी की हर छोटी बड़ी जरूरत के लिए आप जो सपने सजाते हैं, बस उसी उम्मीद को तो हम सहारा लगाते हैं। SIP आपकी सेविंग्स को आपकी खातिर काम पर लगाएगी। आज ही अपनी पहली SIP की शुरुआत करें। अधिक जानकारी के लिए अपने वित्तीय सलाहकार से परामर्श करें। LIC म्यूचुअल फंड द्वारा निवेशक शिक्षा की एक पहल।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार के जोखिम के अधीन है। योजना से संबंधित सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour with me, Munman Bhattacharya. After years of turmoil in the island nation, National People's Power leader Anura Kumara Dissanayake was sworn in as the 9th executive president of Sri Lanka on Monday. In his inaugural address, leftist alliance leader Dissanayake assured people of his dedication to uphold and strengthen democracy, acknowledging the challenges that lie before his government. Take a look at more details on this.
Marxist-leaning politician Aruna Kumara Dissanayake took oath as Sri Lanka's president, a day after he won a comprehensive victory in a closely contested election. These elections knocked out the incumbent president Ranil Wickremesinghe and opposition leader Sajith Premadasa. The mandate is being seen as a vote against the established political parties which have been in power for many years. This was the country's first election since its economy buckled in 2022 under a severe foreign exchange shortage, leaving it unable to pay for imports of essential including fuel, medicine and cooking gas. The protests forced then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to flee and later resign.
We'll see a lot of old players will be taken off from the parliament and well-educated and more youngsters coming into the parliament. It's a very good opportunity for Sri Lanka go for a proper change.
Dissanayake had promised to dissolve parliament within 45 days of taking office for a fresh mandate for his policies in general elections. As per experts, the parliamentary elections can be held as early as in November this year. His party, Janataka Vimukti Peramuna, has only 3 parliamentarians in the 225-member house, which would make it difficult to run the government. On the other hand, as the new government takes shape, people would be looking forward to fulfillment of various promises made by the new president. Voters, particularly the youth, were drawn to his promises of cleaning up the country's politics and easing the economic burden on the populace.
We have a deep understanding that we have got a challenging country. Our politics must be cleaner than this. There is a need for a political culture that people expect. We will commit ourselves to that. The public have a very negative view of politicians and politics.
55-year-old Dissanayake presented himself as the candidate of change for those reeling under austerity measures linked to a $2.9 billion International Monetary Fund bailout. What needs to be seen is that if the new government relaxes austerity measures to ease the troubles for the poor. Despite the uncertainty, Disanayake's election represents a significant political transformation in Sri Lanka. His ability to navigate economic reform and fulfill his promises will define whether his political shift becomes a long-lasting change or a brief departure from the norm. Ahmed Muin Farooqi's report for DD India.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has congratulated Anurag Kumar Dissanayake for his victory in the Sri Lankan presidential elections. In a post on X, PM Modi wrote, "Congratulations Anurag Kumar Dissanayake on your victory in the Sri Lankan presidential elections. Sri Lanka holds a special place in India's neighbourhood first policy and Vision Sagar. I look forward to working closely with you to further strengthen our multifaceted cooperation for the benefit of our people and the entire region." Responding to the Prime Minister's post, Dissanayake pledged to engage in collaborative efforts for the benefit of the region. In a post, he said, and I quote, "Thank you, Prime Minister Modi, for your kind words and support. I share your commitment to strengthening the ties between our nations. Together, we can work towards enhancing cooperation for the benefit of our peoples and the entire region." And for perspective, we are being joined by Dr. Shweta Singh. She is Associate Professor with the South Asian University. Dr. Singh, such a pleasure to have you on DD India. What would you say would be the topmost priority of the new Sri Lankan president?
Thank you, Munmun. I think one of the key challenges for the new president, and this is also the mandate on which he's come back, is actually reviving the economy. And that would be a huge challenge. How does he renegotiate, for instance, with the IMF? We'll have to watch. But, I want to go back in terms of his election manifesto, his campaign. And one of the things that he's laid emphasis is he's paid attention to the economic frustration that people have been facing in Sri Lanka. We all know how the Aragalaya shaped up and what was the push behind the Aragalaya. And I think the frustration in the context of the dwindling economy would be his topmost priority. How he addresses tax cut, how he looks at the question of, food, textiles, tea. This would be something which would be watched very carefully. How would he look at the social security system in the context of high, rising prices in the context of medicine? So I think what I want to come back to is that there would be an emphasis in the context of revival of the economy, paying attention to the poorest of the poor in the context of Sri Lanka. Because we all have to know that the left-leaning alliance that we are looking at, and he represents the JVP, class struggle and attention to politics of class is one of the key elements of the election agenda per se.
Dr. Singh, for starters then, what would be his first challenge? Because he had during his campaign, and I think even in the manifesto, it's mentioned that he would be renegotiating the terms of the IMF bailout, considering that there were several austerity measures that had to be rolled out under the interim government of Ranil Wickremesinghe before, as those were conditions for the IMF to give its bailout to Sri Lanka. So there was a spike in tax measures, public spending was curtailed. How would you look at that? Is that the first challenge then before him?
Yes, absolutely, Munmun. That's the first challenge. He's been very careful in terms of underlying that he will not pull out from the IMF deal that we are talking about, but he would look at renegotiation with vis-a-vis the IMF. Now, it's a very precarious kind of tight walk for him, because on one hand, he needs to balance the aspirations and the interests and the mandate on which he's come back to power. He's come back, he's won this election. On the other hand, we also have to understand the precarious situation of the Sri Lankan economy. So I think much remains to be seen. But one of the things that he's been talking about is the whole context of tax cuts. Now, how he structures this tax cut, especially around, as I said, essential items, would be something which would give a huge relief both to the lower middle class as well as the middle class and the poorest of the poor. So I think IMF, yes, but he would be careful, and I would say the challenge is in the balance. How he's able to strike that balance, because that's been part of his manifesto, but he's also been very clear that he would not do anything to destabilize the economy in Sri Lanka. And it's going to be a slow process now.
Yes.
It's going to be a slow process.
Dr. Singh, what do you make of his vision towards the neighborhood?
Very interesting. I think that's what we really need to carefully watch, because we have to go down in history a bit. We also need to see the democratic transition that has taken place in the context of his own party and the ideology that we are talking about. So just to take you back a bit in history, Aruna Dissanayake, represents the JVP. And the JVP, if you're looking at the ideological component of the JVP, Marxist in terms of its leanings, it's also led armed insurrections in the 1970s, early 1970s and the late 1980s. But then there has been a shift in the context of party politics. And Aruna Dissanayake has been at the forefront of this shift. So there has been a movement away from any kind of politics around violence to democratic transition. So that's one. Now, if I'm looking at the JVP historically has had a very anti-India stance. I'm talking about out historically. Now, Anurag Dissanayake has been very careful. He's said that India is an important ally, is an important, it recognizes the dynamics of the region. We also need to pay attention to that he visited India. He met with the External Affairs Minister and also Ajit Doval. So India has also been carefully watching. So I think what we would really be keen to watch is how does he actually navigate between India and China? Because India and China has competing interests in the context of Sri Lanka. But that's one part of the story. From India's standpoint, there is also, recognition from Anurag Dissanayake that India has also been the first responder in many ways to Sri Lanka. We also have to look at India's role in the context of the response mechanism it had at the moment of the economic crisis 2022. So I think he's been careful to pitch that he would be mindful of Sri Lanka's national interest, but at the same time, he would also be mindful of the fact that India is there in the neighborhood. It's an important regional partner, and also both the countries actually share civilizational linkages. So I think for India's neighborhood first policy, India's Sagar doctrine, we'll have to carefully watch how he navigates this. Just on a slighter note, he's also talked about, because we have to look at, his leanings has been in the context of resurrecting the economy. So he's also talked about, in that context, looking at mechanisms for a corruption-free society, looking at crony capitalism. In that context, there have been, reports where he's talked about, for instance, re-examining the Adani deal that has been part of the wind power mills that we're looking at in the context of Sri Lanka. So I think a lot needs to be watched diplomatically as well as economically, both from the standpoint of India and Sri Lanka.
We'll leave it at that. Dr. Shweta Singh, pleasure to have you on DD India.
Thank you.
More international news. Dengue has claimed 6 more lives in the past 24 hours in Bangladesh, while 926 more patients were hospitalized with viral fever. The death toll from the mosquito-borne disease has reached 131 this year. A total of 24,034 dengue cases have been reported since the 1st of January, according to officials. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Ukrainian president to discuss his victory plan with President Joe Biden in the US. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's party wins regional election in Germany.
जिंदगी की हर छोटी बड़ी जरूरत के लिए आप जो सपने सजाते हैं, बस उसी उम्मीद को तो हम सहारा लगाते हैं। SIP आपकी सेविंग्स को आपकी खातिर काम पर लगाएगी। आज ही अपनी पहली SIP की शुरुआत करें। अधिक जानकारी के लिए अपने वित्तीय सलाहकार से परामर्श करें। LIC म्यूचुअल फंड द्वारा निवेशक शिक्षा की एक पहल।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार के जोखिम के अधीन है। योजना से संबंधित सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour with me, Munman Bhattacharya. A recap of the headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address a summit of the future at the UN headquarters in New York. The theme of the summit is multilateral solutions for a better tomorrow. United Nations adopts groundbreaking Pact for the future to transform global governance. UN Secretary General says the Pact opens the door to new opportunities and untapped possibilities. National People's Power leader Anura Kumara Dasanaike sworn in as the President of Sri Lanka. A lot of diplomatic action is underway at the United Nations headquarters in New York. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also going to address the Summit of the Future on day 3 of his US visit. Now, Amritpal Singh is joining us from New York. Amrit, the Pact of the Future has been adopted at the United Nations. It has 5 chapters focusing on 5 major issues. Does the Pact rekindle hope of multilateral cooperation to deal with challenges of today and tomorrow?
That's right, Munmun. The pact that was Pact for the Future that was adopted yesterday at this summit, this 2-day summit, which the Prime Minister is going to address today, is essentially, looking at how multilateralism can be, again brought back to the table, how it can be given a renewed push. As you said, there are 5 areas that it tries to deal with. There are actually one pact which is called the Pact for the Future, and it has 2 annexures. One other one called the Digital Compact, and one of the Pact for the Future Generations. It looks at youth. It looks at how AI and technology can be used for transforming human lives, how to avoid conflicts and wars. This was being negotiated for the past 9 months between the member states. Yesterday there was quite a drama before it was finally passed. A group of about 7 nations led by Russia tried to upend the pact, saying that they wanted a certain clause, but after voting it was defeated, and finally the pact that was adopted was without the Russian proposed amendment. Now this Pact for the Future lists out what it tries to achieve, and on the principle it tries to achieve, but the big question is whether they'll be able to implement what they're trying to, what they've agreed upon, because that is where the catch lies. This pact is a non-binding pact. All 3 of them are non-binding on member states. So as you know, realpolitik plays out in the end. Nations act in their own self-interest, and whatever the UN passes may or may not be abided by, as we know in the present conflicts also, that it hasn't been able to really give solutions. It is a good pact which lays out the vision for the future. The big question is, would they implement it, and implement it in what context? would it be selective implementation? So that's the big question that looms large. But yes, in principle, they've agreed to infuse multilateralism to the world body and creating a more inclusive global governance architecture. Munmun.
Yes, so you are saying that the Pact for the future may have been adopted, but remains to be seen whether it will be implemented considering the realities of realpolitik. But for India, would Prime Minister's upcoming address to the Summit of the Future be an occasion to share his vision on tackling global challenges?
Absolutely. The Prime Minister will very forcefully put in a couple of hours when he addresses the Summit of the Future, will very strongly make a case for reform of international institutions, including the UN Security Council. The Prime Minister would make a strong case for, is expected to make a strong case for an inclusive agenda which takes into account the aspirations, goals and aspirations of the global south, of the developing world, and factor them into the global governance architecture, and with an urgent need to look at to implement that and to make reforms to that effect, be it in international financial institutions, be it making the UN Security Council, as I said, more inclusive and broad-based, be it using technology and AI to better human lives, and as you know, that India's rising stature and heft at the global stage brings in a certain leverage that India has, and we saw that play out at the G20, at the that how India has emerged as the voice of the global south. So the Prime Minister address is expected to be on those lines. Munmun.
We'll leave it at that. Amritpal Singh reporting from New York. India could surpass per capita income of $10,000 by 2047, the timeline set by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to make it a developed nation, as that is when India completes 100 years of independence. Political economist Gautam Sen, in a conversation with DD India, says former Cisco CEO John Chambers' remark that the Indian economy could be twice the size of China by the end of the century may be too far down the line for any kind of a forecast. Listen in.
Thank you for joining us, Professor Sen. Just wanted to get your first thoughts on what Chairman Emeritus of Cisco, John Chambers, has said about how Indian economy will not only outpace China, but be perhaps even 100% bigger than China by the end of the century, although India at the moment is the fastest growing major economy in the world, also the fifth largest.
A century is a very long view, so hard to predict what will happen in a century. Many things can intervene to change the course of events. But at the moment, we really don't know the exact size of China's economy. There is speculation that it is 18, or others say 14, even 12. Now, India is already 4 trillion. At an 8% growth rate, it takes 14 years to triple, which means in 2038, India will already have reached 12 trillion, maybe a little bit more. And I did some quick back of the envelope calculation earlier today, and India will pretty much reach 7 trillion by 2031. That is in 7 years' time. Again, presuming 8%, though India could grow faster depending on a number of factors.
So I'll just ask your first thoughts on what John Chambers has said, again, in the context of how India is already growing and is already the fifth largest economy in the world. If you could just go back to your answer.
Well, John Chambers speaks about the end of the century. That's a very long period, and it is hard to say exactly what the outcome will be. Many factors could intervene to change the course of events. Now, China's slowdown was expected. It was plateauing. You cannot have 10, 11% growth indefinitely. And there were some policy issues in China and some political intervention which has affected the Chinese economy. Now, India is already growing at about 8%. The size of the economy is very close to 4 trillion. So at 8% in 14 years, India should triple, which means by 2038, India should be above $12 trillion in aggregate. By 2031, India should reach 7 trillion. Now, a number of factors will dictate how quickly this happens. And I think India could actually grow faster than 8%, though I can see that the IMF and banks are predicting 7.5% for next year. But as I said, there are many unknowns which could increase the rate or indeed even slow it down.
Right, that is there. But if you look at what S&P Global also said recently, with the kind of growth rate that India is registering, that it will be the third largest economy in the world by the end of this decade. And some people argue with that as well, saying that it will probably happen even sooner than that, sooner than 2030.
On current trends, it seems very likely India will become the third largest economy in the world. Again, hoping nothing extraordinary happens like war or some disturbance outside. But yes, that seems to be pretty much the consensus. So shouldn't surprise anybody if we reach that. And if it happens earlier, that's also feasible.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, what kind of a path does India need to be consistently on to ensure that it happens?
There are 4 areas that immediately come to mind of reform, which have not really been feasible for all sorts of reasons. The first, of course, is we need a labor law reform. And that's a very political issue and very difficult for any government to embark on, though it was tried in Rajasthan some years ago. Then we need some major changes in land acquisition, which also is a factor in delaying progress. The third is we need a huge boost to vocational training and skilling. India lags behind in this area compared to certainly China, Vietnam, and other Southeast Asian countries. Now, the government has made a start, but we need to really make a massive effort at the school level, particularly north of the Vindhyas. So these are the 3 areas. And the fourth is outside our control, which is that India's trade GDP ratio is almost 42, maybe a little bit less now. And for that, what happens in the world economy has a significant impact, because 42% of the world economy, the Indian economy, is dependent on what happens outside. Now, to give you just one random example, if the US economy grows by 1%, by past form, Indian exports to the US market should rise by 1/3. So what is happening in the world with the war in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, these have slowed India's economy down, and it is extremely creditable that in these difficult circumstances, India has managed to reach 8% anyway.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of the areas where India, and particularly the Indian government, the central Indian government, has been giving a huge amount of thrust, be it investment in infrastructure or manufacturing boost in terms of PLI schemes and others, easy credit to smaller enterprises as well, smaller manufacturers, and the technology push that is being given not just for startups but also in frontier tech like AI, etc., generative AI and others. Do you feel that enough is being done there, or do you feel that there is something more that could be done to ensure that we fully leverage the advantages that would accrue once these things are put in place?
Let me preface any remark I make by saying India is an extremely difficult country to run, as all of you, I'm sure, know. And much depends on what happens in the individual state. Agriculture is in their province, and there are many other areas which are part of the state's policy network. And that's why you can see the significant contrast in the performance of different states, with places like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Gujarat doing much better than, say, West Bengal. So much depends on what happens in the individual state. And what is happening in UP will make a big difference to India's overall growth rate. So it is not just the government in Delhi which counts. Now, I think the government has the correct portfolio of policies, more or less. We could argue about where more stress might be laid. The PLI scheme is finally coming of age, and it is having a positive impact. And I'm reading that the growth of manufacturing is rising in India after a very, very long wait of many decades. Infrastructure development has been significant, but bear in mind between 2013 and 2018 or so, the expectations of infrastructure investment were much lower than what actually took place. Between 2020 and 2025, the expectation is that $1.4 trillion will go into investment. That is all areas of infrastructure, roads, ports, communications, urban development. Now, that is a bit of a tall order given that we lost a good 18 months because of COVID. So let's see what happens until the end of 2025. Infrastructure investment is the key to facilitating the growth of the rest of the economy, and the private sector is very dependent. Our logistics costs, I think, are still in the region of 16%, and I think the aspiration is to lower it to 11 and maybe even less. Logistics costs are very critical for our exports, for example. Now, the GST has made a big difference. It has organized the economy much better, made for easier transactions across the country, and government revenues have been rising, both income tax and GST, much of which is now being spent on infrastructure development. And this is where we need to carry on doing what has been happening. And I don't think I would demand more purpose from the government than already displayed. I think the purpose has been unprecedented. And I'm delighted to note that we have the three finest economic policymakers in charge anywhere in the world. Our team is fabulous, and I have the honor to know at least two of them quite well. So everything is in its place. We just don't need disruption within India, and we don't need disruption outside India. And we need a peaceful life, which is why I may say as an aside, the disengagement with China on the border is a good sign that we can have an opportunity to devote our attention to things which really matter. And I'm confident that this government by 2029 will give the economy a great boost. And both the allies who are critical to the government, that is Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar, they are very development oriented. They want change. So I think the team as a whole will wish to go along this way. And the Modi government has achieved a bit of a feat. While investing in infrastructure, they have also reached out on a significant scale to the disadvantaged in our society. The numbers below the poverty line have fallen dramatically. Huge benefits have been dispersed from water to Sauchalaya to gas to banking, and a whole area of areas where the government has actually managed this quite remarkable trick that you have investment and you have welfare and redistribution. Now, when we talk about wealth, it rather underestimates the changes in people's actual livelihood and incomes. And on that score, the government really has to be congratulated, and I'm sure they will do more, particularly with the new era of coalition politics. I am very interested in what happens in UP, because UP has a huge potential for itself, and they have plans for a $1 trillion economy. I think the date was 2026, I think, if I remember correctly. If UP changes, everything changes. And we've had fabulous development of infrastructure in UP under the chief ministership of Yogi Adityanath. So I think everything is looking good. I would just say more of the same with greater determination. And if the revenues keep coming, I'm going to be very optimistic.
Yes, this is what leads me to the next question, and the final question really is that the Prime Minister has also set a goal for India for 2047. By that time, when we complete 100 years of independence, we'll become a developed nation. Now, that also does that seem feasible to you with the way things are going?
We will, I think, reach about $10,000 per capita by 2047. It will take us another 50 years to reach the US levels of per capita income. But $10,000 is a very good place to be, considering where we started in 1947 and the fact that we had 1% per annum growth rate for the preceding 100 years. So, much has happened, and I will add that the last 10 years have been truly remarkable. I don't think we can recall any decade in the past 200-300 years where so much progress has happened. We really do need political stability, and what is very lacking in India, some degree of consensus and common purpose. But everything in India, as we can all see, succumbs to politics. And that is a tragedy.
Okay. And you don't see India falling into the middle income trap?
You know, our population bonus, provided everybody gets jobs and they have the skills, will last for another 25 years. And then we will plateau like China and many other countries. So we have to utilize our population bonus, because basically a lot more people are working, creating output, paying taxes, compared to those who are not in the workforce. A certain portion has left the workforce due to higher education, but we still have relatively high rates of unemployment for graduates. And our problem remains, as the very distinguished Mr. Sabharwal keeps reminding us, productivity, which is our Achilles heel. In order to be better off, individuals must be more productive. And for this, skilling is the key. And I can see the government has inaugurated policies to accelerate skilling. But I think, we must also pay attention to schooling in places like UP, Madhya Pradesh, and all those areas. Because, in Tamil Nadu, with the same per capita spending on schooling, you can entertain the idea of going into higher education. That is not so easy in a place like UP, where, by the way, 2/3 of school students end up in arts. In Tamil Nadu, 2/3 end up in STEM. So this is the kind of ratio we need to change. It is all happening. The question is how quickly we may move in this direction.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to us, Professor Sen.
So continuing their winning streak for the third consecutive trading session, Indian benchmark indices reached new record highs on Monday, driven by strong support from the financial services sector. The Nifty 50 reached a record high of 25,956 points, just shy of the 26,000 mark, before ending the day up 0.57%. Similarly, the BSE Sensex touched a fresh record high of 84,928 points before closing at 84,864 points, which is 0.45% higher than the previous close. In addition, rallies in realty and auto stocks contributed to the market's strength, while the recovery in PSU stocks continued in Monday's session. All major sectoral indices closed in positive territory at the end of Monday's trading session. Amidst the changing dynamics of geopolitics, Indian Navy is all set to circumvent the globe. With a strong message of women empowerment, 2 young lady officers of the Indian Navy would set sail on the 2nd of October, covering more than 21,600 nautical miles in 8 months. Vishal Baristo reports.
Navika Sagar Parikrama II is all prepared to embark on a long and adventurous voyage with Lieutenant Commander Dilna K and Lieutenant Commander Rupa A. Certainly a test of resilience and fitness, both mentally and physically. Indian naval sailing vessel Tarini would sail through all the rough and challenging waters of the globe without any external support.
I do have fear. It's very important that you have a right amount of fear so that you are safe and the boat is safe. You have to be mentally very strong to go through the extreme weather conditions, rough seas, storms, gale force winds. There's no teacher better than the sea.
The 8-month trip would be used as part of military diplomacy by India, and this would be the time for these officers to interact with people in different countries. The Indian embassy would be playing a key role as Tarini passes through different countries.
It's an important arm of diplomacy, and the Navy utilizes every single opportunity it gets to reach out to people and interact with them wherever we go. Whenever a ship goes anywhere, we do a flag showing, and we have events where we interact with people at the local level. This boat is also going to call into 4 or 5 different ports, as was shown, and they're going to be staying there for maintenance periods, and I'm sure the Indian embassies and others there are going to utilize this opportunity to the maximum possible extent that it can.
The route will take them through some of the most treacherous waters, including the perilous passage around the 3 Great Capes, Cape Leuven, Cape Horn and the Cape of Good Hope. The voyage is not just a testament to their personal bravery and skill, but also a celebration of the Indian Navy's commitment to women empowerment, showcasing their spirit and determination. Both the officers have been selected from a batch of 17 aspirants. With 3 years of rigorous training and a sail of 38,000 nautical miles, including Rio and Mauritius, the two lady officers are all set to embark on this adventure. Vishal Baristo's report for DD India.
The Indian Army commemorates 23rd September every year as Haifa Day to pay its respects to 3 brave Indian cavalry regiments that helped liberate Haifa in World War I from Ottoman rule. A program to pay tributes to the brave Indian soldiers was organized today at the Haifa Chowk in Delhi, where Indian Army veterans and representatives of the Israeli Embassy in India laid wreaths and paid tributes to the gallant Indian soldiers.
जो गरीबी है, दुख है, कमजोर है, उसको मदद करता हुआ एक प्रॉस्पर भारत भी होना है। इसलिए दुनिया में एक भरोसा बना है, गारंटर ऑफ पीस, प्रॉस्पेरिटी, हार्मोनी, लव, ये कौन हो सकता है? लोगों को लगता है कि अगर भारत लीड ले और वर्तमान में भारत के प्रधानमंत्री उसके लिए नेतृत्व करें, तो युद्ध से बुद्ध की ओर दुनिया जा सकती है।
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in the United States to discuss his victory plan with President Joe Biden. With his plan, Zelensky aims to bring peace and end the 2.5-year-long ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The Ukrainian president was welcomed by Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and both leaders witnessed the signing of the sister state agreement between Pennsylvania and Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region. Zelensky will attend sessions at the UN General Assembly along with other world leaders.
We need peace on the terms provided by the peace formula or the terms provided by the UN Charter. We will do everything to achieve that, get weapons to defend our independence and our people, deploy diplomacy to consolidate our partner support and force Russia into peace.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats Party won the regional election with nearly 31% of votes. In Brandenburg, Social Democrats celebrated their win against the far-right Alternative for Germany or AfD party. The SPD scored 31.8% of the votes against AfD's 29.2% and has ruled the state since reunification in 1990.
In großen Teilen und in ihrem Gesamtwesen offen rechtsextrem.
When an openly, in big parts, and overall, openly right-wing extremist party in a state scores around 30% of votes, it's hugely alarming for all of us, for all Democrats, for everyone who stands up for freedom, openness and tolerance. Despite all the pride we feel today due to the good result, we must take this seriously. We must continue the debate after this election campaign. Brandenburg only has a chance if Brandenburg remains a liberal-minded and tolerant state.
Auseinandersetzung auch nach dem Wahlkampf intensiv weiterführen.
And finally, a story that should interest Indian cinema buffs particularly. Kiran Rao's directorial venture Lapata Ladies is India's official entry for the 97th Oscars. Produced by renowned actor Amir Khan, the Hindi film is about 2 well-defined, powerful women characters. It was chosen for India's representation in the Academy Award category for the Best Foreign Film from a list of 29 films. After being a critical and commercial success in both its theatrical and OTT run, Lapata Ladies has been unequivocally loved by everyone in India and specially appreciated for its hard-hitting dialogues.
Wow.
That's it in this edition of DD India News Hour, but do share your thoughts with us on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. This is Munmun Bhattacharya from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.